Hey there, I hope you're having a fantastic day. If you're like I've been lately, feels kind of like we're in a pit, we're in a rut, and we're just having a tough time getting out of it. So, our message today is going to be about what are you doing in that pit that you're in? What are you doing? And so that's what we're going to focus on. And I decided for this one to go back in the Old Testament and want to review a story about somebody who literally was in a pit. So we're going to be reading a couple of different scriptures from Genesis. The first one I'll share is from Genesis 37. And this is a familiar story about Joseph, a young man named Joseph. And I'll start with 37, verse 2. And I may skip around a little bit. Okay. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers. He brought their father a bad report about them. Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he'd been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for Joseph. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word about him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field, and suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, and all of yours gathered round mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. And then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. "Listen, I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Now I'm going to pause there. You know that what happens is his brothers, their jealousy overcomes them, and they plot against him, and they end up saying, "Okay, we're going to throw him," and they throw him in this pit. And that's where I want to really pick up. I just want to give you a little background about why his brothers did it. They're jealous. They're jealous because he's dad's favorite. And if you have kids or you are a kid, you always want to know, oh, mom likes this one better. Or if your kids ask you, you're like, "I don't have a favorite." Well, in this case, Jacob, or Israel, really did have a favorite, and it really was Joseph, and it was pretty obvious. He made him the special coat. He treated him better. Everyone knew that Joseph was the favorite, and so they wanted to get rid of him. "We're not going to bow down to you. That's not happening." So he ends up being sold, being thrown in the pit by his brothers, and then being sold by his brothers. So he is in a pit. Now he's only 17. He's just a boy. And here he is. This is a pit with maybe some rocks and roots and not much else. There's no way for him to climb out of it on his own. There's no water. There's no food. They had even torn his tunic off of him. He didn't have any protection from nightfall if it turned cold where he was. He's got nothing, and he's in this pit. And he screams and screams. His brothers ignore that. Later on, in Genesis, they tell how they felt guilty hearing his screams, but they did not respond. And here he is in this pit. Now, you know, when he got in this pit, he had a couple of choices, and we'll read in a minute about what he did. But when we get into pits, and we do, maybe not like his, but we get into pits. What do we do? And I'm going to share with you a couple of stories about people that these are not people I know personally. They're people I've heard about. There was one lady, I'll call her Margaret, and she and her husband had 3 beautiful children, been married for 20 years, and then her husband decided, not in love with you anymore. I found somebody else, and she's a lot younger. So here Margaret is, after 20 years, with who she thought was her soulmate. And now she's having to face life without her husband, but raising her children. And not only without her husband, watching him make a life with someone else. Margaret's in a pit. Not of her own making, but she's there. And then we've got a man named Jimmy. Jimmy's 57. And he went to work. He said some things he shouldn't have said. Some things that were inappropriate. And those things got him fired. So now Jimmy is facing, his wife is upset because their income's gone. The kids don't know they're just confused. They don't know what's going on either. And because he's 57, he's not able to easily find a new job. And he's in a pit. He didn't ask for it. Maybe his actions led to it. But he certainly didn't want to be in the pit. But he's there. Then we've got Kathy. She's a teenager. She's working. She's going to school. She's doing everything she can do to be a good kid. But her parents, when she was little, divorced and remarried and divorced and remarried. And at this point, they've told her, look, you've got to choose. They put her in a bad position. They said, choose if you want to live with mom or with dad. Kathy's in a pit. A pit that no kid deserves to be in, choosing between parents. And yet there she is. Now, some of you watching are in a pit or have been in one. If you're a woman who has lost her husband, or a husband who's lost his wife, you're in a pit of grief. If you are, and I do know some people who have lost a child, that's a horrible pit to be in. Certainly didn't ask for it, and yet there you are. If you're worrying, how do I pay my light bill? How do I buy a new tire for the car? You got some money problems. That is a very deep pit that you sure didn't ask for, but there you are. If you're looking for a job, and I know they say jobs are plentiful, but it's not always as easy to find one as you think it is. You're in a pit. If you are wondering, how do I face tomorrow? I can't go to the store because of COVID. I can't walk because my knee hurts. I can't do this or that. And none of it is your fault. It's honestly not your fault, but you're in a pit. How do you get out? How did Jacob get out? And there's another, well, there's some I'm going to tell you, and then we're going to read some more verses. I'm going to tell you this first. Whatever pit you're in, here are some words for you. You'll get through this. It won't be easy. It won't be painless. And it may not be quick. But God's going to use your mess for good. You hear me? God will use your pit for good. So let's see what happens here with Joseph. He's in his pit. We know how he got there. We know he certainly didn't deserve it. And the story is bad enough there, but it gets worse. He does get out of the pit because his brothers sell him into slavery. It got worse. He went from a pit to a prison. Well, it took a couple of stops along the way because he was accused of doing things he did not do. He was innocent in all of this. He couldn't help being the favorite. It's just how Dad felt. Then he sold into slavery, accused by Potiphar's wife. You'll have to go read the whole story. I'm skipping over a lot of things. But he's accused, thrown into prison, and there he is in another kind of pit. And how did he survive it? Well, before this all happened, you notice he had the dreams. And not only God gives him the gift of the dreams, but then when he's in prison, God gives him the gift of being able to interpret dreams. So he has a gift that is given by God of not only dreaming, but interpreting the dreams. And here's how he survived. He never lost sight of God. And he used his gift even in the pit, the prison pit. If you remember that, and I'm not reading these scriptures, but you can look them up in Genesis. There were two prisoners that had dreams, and he interpreted those dreams. And quite some time later, they remember what he did. And he is put in a position to interpret dreams for Pharaoh. So where a lot of people who are in prison or in a pit or in any kind of a situation they don't want to be in, they close their eyes, they ignore the situation hoping it goes away, they just don't respond at all. Joseph did not remain inactive. He used the gift that God gave him, and he remembered who God was. So he's now interpreting the dreams for Pharaoh. And not only does God give him the gift of that interpretation of dreams, God gives him another gift, because when he interprets the dreams about their 7 years of plenty and then 7 years of famine, and he tells Pharaoh this, and Pharaoh says, okay, do something about it. God gives him the wisdom to, when he's put in charge, to know we need to save as much as we can during these plenty years to have it during the famine years. So God gives him two gifts here. The gift, well, three really. The gift of dreams, the gift of interpreting the dreams, and then the gift of wisdom to know what to do about it. And then the one I really want you to focus on is over in Genesis 50. Okay? And this is after he's been reconciled with his brothers, and you can read that story. He ends up reconciling with them, but they're still frightened. They're feeling very sorry for what they've done to him, even all these years later. And this is in Joseph 50. Let's go to about verse 18. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. We are your slaves, they said. What he dreamed earlier. They didn't like it, but here they are doing exactly what was in the dream. But Joseph, now see, in this position, I'd be saying, I told y'all so. I told y'all this was going to happen. I dreamed it. Joseph's not like me. He's a lot better than me. He says, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children. And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. Did you hear that? God intended it for good. You intended harm, but God used it for good to accomplish what's happening now, saving lives. Joseph never forgot who God was. Joseph never stopped using the gifts that God gave him, even though he had every reason to. He never stopped. Now, what if at the very beginning Joseph had kept his dreams to himself? Brothers might never have sold him. He might never have been sent into slavery. What if he'd kept that interpretation to himself in prison? He'd have never caught the eye and ear of Pharaoh, never interpreted those dreams. Who would have been harmed if Joseph had ignored his gift? Thousands of people would have died. I don't know how many thousands. that whole the Egyptians too, and all of the Israelites would have died during the famine. But Joseph stayed faithful and used his gifts. Whatever you're going through, whether people are actively out to get you, whether you're just in a situation that seems hopeless, whatever is happening to you, whatever pit you're in, you're not in there alone. You may not be able to climb out on your own, but God's there ready to reach down and pick you up. Maybe not in the time you envision, maybe not in the way you envision, and when he pulls you out, he may not set you exactly where you think he's going to, but he's going to pick you up. And he wants you to keep being faithful to him, keep using the gifts you've been given, even when you're in the pit and when you get out. It's easy to wallow in our pits because there are so many problems right now, but there have always been problems. There are always going to be. It doesn't mean we can give up. Joseph did not give up. God did not give up on Joseph. And look at what happened. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. That's what I want you to focus on this week when you're tempted to lay in that pit on the rocks. Let the roots poke you in the back. When you're laying there, look up and remember who's really in charge and that he's working through that for good. As hard as it may be to understand sometimes, just believe that he's working through it for your good and for his good. I love you. Let me know if I can do anything for you, or if you just need some encouragement when you're down in that pit. Have a fantastic day.